How did you do this?
Do what? This?
Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Time for a review, Dr. John Lockdown. Dr. John is a singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, session musician, and iconic figure in New Orleans music, especially when it comes to blues, funk, R&B, jazz, and psychedelic rock. There's been a lot of versatility over the 20 or so albums this guy has released over the years. He's recently been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as well. Unfortunately, his music is not really garnering the attention that it used to, but this new LP, Lockdown, is receiving some really positive attention, and for good reason. It's a solid album, which we will get into later, but part of the reason I think this LP is catching some momentum is because it's a little change in direction thanks to working with Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys, who produced this LP. And what Dan is doing for John on this LP reminds me a lot of what Rick Rubin was doing for Johnny Cash on his final albums. Rick revitalized Johnny's sound, not by going for something that was really clean and sleek, slick, and modern. Instead, shooting for something that's much more earthy, gritty. The instrumentation on those final Cash records just sounded so aged and weathered. And Dan is basically doing the same thing. I don't think The Good Doctor could have gotten a better production endorsement from a modern artist. Not only do I think Black Keys fans can very easily slide into enjoying this LP, but the production Dan brings to the table, just like in usual Black Keys fashion, references the past, which I think old school Dr. John fans will appreciate, but it's got a really modern punch to it. The opener, the title track to this album, starts with these birds squawking. It's like I'm in a bird sanctuary. This drum roll comes in, building things up against these kind of tribal chants. And then this clunky New Orleans style funk groove comes in that not only references old school Dr. John, but artists like the Meters and Lee Dorsey too. And over this funk groove, to kind of back up the hook, this really metallic vibraphone and these backup vocals and horns come in, kind of giving the track a slightly lounge jazz feel. I really love the sounds, the extra sounds that come together on this track, but the foundational stuff, the guitars, the drums, the vocals, they sound great too. The drums have a kind of, I guess, ratty quality to them, I want to say, but not ratty in a bad way. They don't sound like they're mic'd very close, so you're catching a lot of kit noise, a lot of room noise, but the drums still have a lot of crispness to them. And the guitars, which of course are played by Dan Auerbach, have that trademark Black Keys tone to them. The upright bass thuds away. Basically, the instrumentation to me sounds like a beat up old pickup truck. It's souped up, the engine growls, the wheel wells are all rusted, there's bugs caught in the grill, the windshield is cracked, but, you know, runs good. And as far as the vocals go, I know this gets said about a lot of aging singers, but I'm not BSing here. I do think Dr. John's voice has gotten more interesting with old age. It is so raspy. Rasp, rasp, rasp. His voice has always kind of had a raspy quality to it, but now it's just more than ever. And it's adding a lot of character in a very Tom Waits kind of way. And Dr. John still manages to carry a tune, be very emotive in these songs. And thanks to the lyrics on this LP, he's sounding kind of fed up with the world at large too. There are all sorts of words on this album referencing the present being an ice age, liars going to hell, people doing drugs and losing their jobs. Revolution is the final solution. It's a bit of a wake-up call because if you were to see the world from Dr. John's viewpoint, it would probably look like it's crumbling fast. Vocally, the only spots I'm not really in love with on this album are the moments where Dr. John's vocal melodies may be getting a little repetitive on the verse, or the verses where he's not really so much singing as he is doing a bit of a spoken word thing. I'm talking tracks like Ice Age, Big Shot, You Lie. But the production, the songwriting, and the instrumentation, whether it be some really sultry horns or a bright old school organ, all of that saves these songs from being bad, for sure. I'm just saying these moments just aren't as captivating to me, I guess. Because this album is solid enough to the point where you could just ride through the lows and it's not even really a big deal because the highs are so high. There is a good amount of variety on here too. I like the brisk, speedy tempo on the track Getaway, which is in 3/4 and has a fantastic guitar solo from Dan on the end of it. I love the slow, brooding funk of Kingdom of IZZNESS, the balladry that's happening on My Children, My Angels, where the lyrics try to be a bit of advice to the youth, the next generation. The track ELEGGUAH really pulls up the New Orleans funk roots of this album like no other track does. Lots of sharp guitar leads, very heavy, very chunky drums. And the closer on here, God Sure Good, takes a bit of a religious and a gospel angle to this album, finishing things off on a kind of positive note. Overall, it's a very good album. It's not exactly new ground or mind-blowing for Dr. John, but it does sound great to hear him kind of revitalized, restored, in a really tasteful way. So definitely check this thing out. It's the kind of stuff that swamps and hard liquor and dusty old bars and the sweat beating off of the head of a lone saxophone player at some smoky nightclub where the maximum capacity is 50 people is made of. Definitely feeling a strong 7 on this thing. What did you guys think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? And what should I review next? Anthony Fantano, Dr. John, forever.